Internet's down, can't stream, can't go live, but it's all good. Can't let that stop us, right? So we're doing something a little different today. Just gotta roll with the punches, roll with the punches. So basically, I've been in this program the last 2 years. This is year number 3. And what I'm studying is this concept that I call psychological advantageousness. Psychological advantageousness refers to the benefits conferred to an individual in terms of their mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure by some factor, belief, practice, organizational affiliation, etc. Psychology is, by definition, a study of the soul. And so the premise of the concept is that souls exist. And I am actually a soul in flesh having a human experience. And because of that, I mean, I say necessarily because of that, but in having that human experience, there is beliefs are arbitrary. You can believe whatever you want, but in many cases, people select beliefs on a first-come, first-served basis. And the concept of psychological advantageousness adds the ability to critique beliefs in terms of their impact on quality of life. Sometimes beliefs like politics, art, religion are subjects that people tend to not want to argue about or criticize. But this notion of psychological advantageousness actually gives us maybe an intersubjective, or at least I don't even want to say necessarily objective, but it gives us some basis to evaluate beliefs and decisions. So the question is, who is more advantaged, Christians or Muslims, Bloods or Crips, Qs or Alphas, teachers or administration? Those types of questions, in the past, before discussing psychological advantageousness, we could discuss the benefits for them in terms of money, which, I can come back to money because money does affect quality of life. But this is not a economics approach that I'm looking at this concept. I'm looking at it, how it affects thoughts and feelings. And under the umbrella of thoughts and feelings, there's, beliefs, there's schemas, there's moods, as opposed to affect. There's, in some senses, personality that is kind of built up over time because within my theory, beliefs being arbitrary and coming at a first come first served basis also means that they are not only subject to change, but some may be better to have than others. Certain beliefs, it may just be a package deal, and this is where the questions come in, where I don't necessarily have final answers. But the question is, if I have certain beliefs, am I better off mentally and emotionally? Are my thoughts better? Do I feel better? Things like that. One simple way to look at it is who makes, and this is using money as an example, but ultimately you want to get to thoughts and feelings, but who makes more money, Christians or Muslims? And those are, by doing organizational affiliation, we may mask some of the smaller we basically mask addressing beliefs one by one by referring to a belief system such as a religion. Within Christianity, there's a number of beliefs, and so to compare a Christian to a Muslim might obscure which beliefs are actually causing the benefit. This concept is within the field of positive psychology, so I'm really looking at what's going right for a person. It's very similar, this work is very similar to what motivational speakers study in terms of you have certain books, self-help books and stories of motivational speakers going around talking to successful people who they deem to be successful and asking them, how did you get here? What did you do? Things like that. And that's essentially one of the inspirations, for this work. At least, not the inception, but the continuation, because I consume a lot of motivational content. I've listened to motivational speakers long enough to be able to judge them in the sense of which ones I like and which ones I don't really like, to develop, when I say judge them, I mean to discriminate or develop a preference, to have a better understanding, okay, this person's message is this, and this person's delivery is this, and I get this from this person and this from that person. Or, you gotta kind of be there long enough to get that. And I feel like since I've been consuming motivational content for the past 6 years, I've heard enough. I still do consume it, but I've heard enough to do what I'm doing now, which is, studying beliefs. And also my background is in philosophy. And so I remember one time I had a class where, and this was probably my freshman or sophomore year of college at Howard University. And I remember in the class, we was learning about constructing arguments, and discussing, I guess, whether or not beliefs are on the table to be argued about. Can you even argue about beliefs, or is it, everyone's reserved to, believe their own thing, and so one of my professors, I want to say it was Dr. Charles Baharin. Um, my memory served me, which typically it does. There was a situation where this might have been one of those intro to philosophy classes. It was one of them classes where like you might have business majors in there. They're just trying to graduate. They're just trying to do what they gotta do to graduate. They're not necessarily really like into it like that. When I graduated, it may have been like 30 philosophy majors. So it wasn't like a common, it wasn't necessarily like a popular major to have. So when you went into the classes, a lot of the people in there were non-majors. And that's okay, it's nothing against them. But I say that to say, maybe them being non-majors, they weren't as interested in questions or questioning certain things, or maybe they didn't come there to do deep dives. But this one lady in the class talked about her belief in Christianity, and when she talked about it, it's kind of like whatever you say, like you can basically, what I took from the class was like, you can say whatever you want to say, but once you say it, you open it for scrutiny, and so you can say, yeah, I believe God exists. That's fine. And nobody can say like that's quote unquote wrong. However, they can ask, how come you believe that? And so some people may not have thought about why they believe that. Because again, going back to what I'm saying, that beliefs are arbitrary. Many of them are on a first come, first served basis. Some people may have been introduced to their religion since before they could even speak, their language. And so to them, the religion was just a part of the package deal of being born into that family. Like it may be just part of the family's culture to go to church on Sundays, or go to the masjid on Fridays, or go to church on Saturdays, or whatever their beliefs are. But basically I'm saying like, we can be more informed consumers of it, even if you can study it and realize, I'm gonna keep this, like Christianity actually works for me. But I think the gift of questioning is to become more informed when you consume. Like, okay, yeah, I know, maybe I do believe this because this is what was introduced to me first, but that's not a reason to stop believing it. But maybe it is for some people. I may be a little off track a little bit. I'm painting, I'm just freestyling this explanation of my research. But long story short, the notion of psychological advantageousness has a philosophical root or origin to it. And so when I'm thinking about the concept and thinking about like lit review and trying to figure out how to best present it, I think it's best to introduce it as a philosophical endeavor at its core, because originally, in some instances when I attempted to describe the concept in terms of people, in terms of whether or not an individual was more or less psychologically advantaged than another, there seemed like there was a gap, like there was something missing, because now that sounds like we can't really measure that, because how can I say I'm more advantaged than you? I think it would require us having some end goal, like advantaged at what, to what end, in what situation, on what day, under what circumstances, and by whose determination and definition. There was so much room for error when I brought it down to people, but it's not about the person, because the person is a projection, and in some sense, this is a reflection of the soul inside of the flesh. And so my perspective in introducing this concept as a philosophical endeavor is that it's not so much about people. It's not about persons. It's about suke, which is the soul, and studying that. And as a soul, just starting as a tabula rasa, like a blank slate, what did you pick up along your journey? You know, if this was perfect example would be certain shooting games like Call of Duty. I don't know all the games, but I've been playing PUBG lately. On PUBG, when you start the game off, you jump out of an airplane and you land somewhere on this map. Depending on where you land, and I guess how the algorithm of the of the video game works, there's certain weapons you'll find within the vicinity of where you landed, and then other weapons you may never see. There's also vehicles, there's armor, there's different things that you can equip to prepare yourself for, the challenges that's going to be thrown your way, such as other users trying to defeat you, such as the board itself shrinks. So in some instances, having a vehicle is beneficial to you because as the board shrinks, if you get caught in a zone outside of like the designated area, you start to lose health. Health is another one. Like as you travel, going in different buildings, you going from one section of the map to the next, you'll start to see like different means of refilling your health, whether it's a medikit or whether it's like a little soda. It's not actually soda, but it's some type of drink thing or adrenaline shot. It's all these different things, right? And the point that I'm making, or to illustrate what I'm saying, is that you land on the ground naked, you blink, right? And this kind of ties into my theory of personality. I see personality as kind of like a Plinko board. And this is not to advertise that brand, but it's basically that board where you drop a ball at the top. It's a bunch of pegs that ball is going to hit, and then it's going to land somewhere, at the bottom where there's these different sections where it could land. Now, where you drop it from and where it lands, there may be some correlation there. I'm not sure, but there's hits that it has to go through. Experiences. People get pushed around. Even adults get pushed around. This is just part of, to my knowledge, human development, which is why I figure, I am very interested in human development and how people become. And so, to me, personality is not as stable as some people have stated it to be. To me, it's very changing because as you drop that ball at the top, right, and it hits that first peg, that's your parents. When you come into earth, when you manifest in the flesh, the first person that's going to push you around is going to be your parents, because they're going to tell you what to do and what not to do. They're going to mold you in their, sometimes literally, like they grab the baby head and shape it, round it off, or just haphazardly mold you, not even realize like the things that they expose to you, the things they say to you, things they show. All of that will have an impact. And so that's going to help shape, what your personality ultimately expresses as, and in what, situations or scenarios. So, to me, personality is kind of like clothes. Over time, what I've noticed is that, physical life is finite. And so, it's kind of like the Plinko board, but them pegs won't always be there, for one. And not every peg is weighted the same. So on a traditional Plinko board, like the one I seen online, all the pegs are like uniform, right? But consider the fact that maybe some pegs are wide and some are narrow, some are like stronger, and some have like a weakened integrity. So even if you bump it and you it may be stronger than you, but it may have weak integrity. It may have a notch in it somewhere. And because you're not using a fresh Plinko board, you're using the same board that other people are using, you're also a peg on somebody else's board. So there's a lot of like multiplicity going on, but just for the sake of illustrating what I'm saying in the simplest way, the pegs on the board change. And when the pegs on the board change, if you were to pick that ball up and drop it from the same spot, it's going to land, it's likely going to land in a different spot. And so what you'll see is that people develop personalities when they have a certain social dynamic that is maintained over time. You have people alive, you act like that because you got such and such is alive right now. When they pass away, when they no longer exist in the physical, sense of the word, their soul is no longer inside of a physical human body, you may change. You may change what you do for fun, the grief process. But in the grief process, there is a renewal, right? So there is a reimagining of the self in the sense that some of the things that you stop doing after they pass, you may stop doing till you in the grave, You may come back to it, but you may just leave it alone altogether. And that's your choice. But I'm just using that to say personality, even like the way you treat people could change. Losing a loved one can really change just how we see the world, how we see ourselves, because, and this is drawn on African concepts like I am because we are, which there's many other like logical transformations of that same statement, such as we are because I am, or I am not because we are not, or we are not because I am not, or I am because we are not, or we are not because I am. It's a lot of ways you could rearrange the wording and say the same thing. But basically people are shaped, by the pillars around them. And the pillars are, the other people, the other souls around them that talk to them, that put bugs in their ear, that, tell them do this or don't do that. It's the influence. Social media would be, for some people, if we were to lump it all together into one Plinko board, one peg, it might be a large peg that might be pushing a lot of people in a similar direction, or it may differentially push types of people, such as different genders, in certain directions, right? Like it might encourage women to show one thing, encourage men to show another, or white men to show this and black men to show that. There may be the pegs themselves may have their own biases and opinions, which might affect how, when you're going down the Plinko board as a soul, you get pushed around in ways that are unique to you. And some of those experiences may be entirely your own. And so, when you think about going back to psychological advantageousness and the example of a video game, because I know I kind of went off on personality, starting life as this blank slate, when you land on that map, you gotta find a gun. The gun that you find might not be the gun that you want, but it's the one that you got, and it shoot. So you either gonna say, nah, I ain't gonna carry it, or you're gonna take it until you can get a better one. Now, it is possible you could take it and end up liking it. Like at certain times I picked up weapons I ain't really like that much, but then I realized, oh, this joint automatic. I could just press down and shoot. This joint gonna go. Or, oh, I thought this joint was alright, but this joint don't have no ammo. Or it only shoot 2 rounds at a time. Like, what am I gonna do with this? Or, oh, this is a sniper. I'm not even trying to be shooting from long range like that. It's a lot of ways that you can critique it, but going back to how people kind of choose beliefs on a first come, first served basis, some people don't. Or that becomes a later stage in their development, whether it's in their religion or within their family. Just after a while, you start to question, like, what's going on here? Why do we do what we do? Why do I believe what I believe? All those types of questions. And then again, there's that renewal, that rebirth of the self where you figure out, man, you know what, I don't even want to go to church. I never really liked church for real. I just went because I didn't really have a choice. Like my mother made me go to church, my grandmother made me go to church, or whatever the case, whatever, the story is or was. And so, going back to psychological advantageousness is basically saying, you know, if we're in the game, how much of a benefit do you get when you pick up the shotgun? How does you wielding the shotgun as you're going through the video game, as you're playing the game, trying to be the last man standing, how does you wielding the shotgun affect how you feel and what you think? Now, my hypothesis is that there will be an effect. So I'm not even, skeptical about that. But some people may say, is there an effect at all? And I think so. I think if you only have a pistol and you know that there's assault rifles and semi-automatics and stuff in this game, and regardless of how you feel about your own skill level at playing the game, that may affect how you feel when you see, like, okay, you in the red zone and there's 5 other players in your vicinity, you got a pistol and they got automatic weapons. You know that what you're carrying in terms of your beliefs, your thoughts, your schemas, your mood, your affect, your tendencies, all the things that make up your intrapsychic world are going to affect your quality of life. It's going to affect how you feel and what you think about, and then ultimately your performance, And so that's basically what I'm studying, and like to move away from guns, but into really what I'm talking about is just beliefs. So one example that I use is, would you consider the belief that the world owes me everything, as opposed to the world owes me nothing? Now, these are two beliefs. In some sense, they may seem opposing. Other people might argue that you could believe both at the same time. I mean, that's not really the point, but the point being, like, this is an example of, example belief, basically. And so, when you take the belief that the world owes you everything, well, I'm sure that may affect how someone feels, when they go out into the world, what they expect from other people. And then there's going to be some domino effect, because that expectation may or may not be met. And, if it's not met, it's going to kind of check your chin a little bit, like how you're going to respond to it. Now, if you believe that the world owes you everything, you may respond to that by, yelling, trying to talk to a manager at a store, like, y'all gonna give me what y'all owe me. Some people may, respond differentially depending on, how they were pushed around growing up, and who did the pushing, and how they learned to respond to that. And so, when you look at the beliefs, I guess the objectivity of it, or the part that we measure, is like, let's group people based on what they believe, and then let's see if we can find any correlation between people that have this belief and their quality of life. So, and this is why I say it's kind of moving away from persons. The person themselves is not under scrutiny. The belief itself is under scrutiny. And by scrutinizing beliefs, that empowers people to decide, to make an informed decision about what beliefs they want to adopt. So if I have 10 people that believe the world owes them everything, and then 10 people that believe the world owes them nothing, and then we give both groups a measure of their general affect, like what emotions they experience most often, which I'm in the process of, validating such an assessment, which, I created, but I'm in the process of validating it now. And it basically is a measure of like disposition. And I'm looking at my notes because I got it written down, but y'all can't see it. It basically measures like disposition, affect, like disposition and affect as a means of assessing quality of life. So now that I'm saying this out loud, there is a gap, between, one could argue that, you can have a happy mood, but to what extent does that define your quality of life as a whole? I don't know. I don't know that, but these are the types of questions and that's why I'm excited about this research, because I feel like this opens a whole body of work. There's 1,000,001 questions that are derivative from just understanding the concept. Now we can ask new questions. It's 2023, So in a world of innovation and new technology, this is my 2 cents, this is my contribution. This is what I'm adding to the literature. This is, part of what I'm giving back to life and to the people. And so that's like pretty much it in a nutshell, like just evaluating beliefs in terms of, okay, you got 10 people that believe the world owes them nothing, 10 people that believe the world owes them everything. Which group has a higher average or mean score on the depression scale? Who's more depressed? The people that believe the world owes them everything, or the people that believe the world owes them nothing? Or taken differently, or I guess in another way, who's more anxious? Who is more just like generally satisfied with life? And, we can use the way it's operationalized could be done 1,000,001 ways. There's quality of life assessments out there already that can be used. There's the measure that I'm in the process of validating, and there may be other measures. I mean, this is something that's like commonsensical, so you can talk about this at the barbershop. I mean, who's more satisfied in their relationships? The men that believe, like you can take, like say we get a sample of married men, right? And you have, on one hand, you got married men that believe in traditional gender roles, like men should work outside of the house and women should work inside the house. And then you got men that believe that, those roles, they're open to those roles switching. Which group would have a higher average score on like a life satisfaction assessment? Now, some skeptics may say like, there's no correlation, there's no connection between the two, but that's essentially what, the research is showing or demonstrating, to me, because, I've observed a lot of research in these classes. I'm hearing about all this great stuff these other people did and all that, and me, I enjoy doing more than talking. And so, yeah, it's cool to hear about what other people are doing, but I want a piece of that action. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to get some of that. I want to, get active in the field. And so, when I'm listening to like these other studies and things like that, it seems like, and from I guess a methodological standpoint, a lot of research I've noticed just deals with calibration as a means of, I guess, inquiry. Like if we can calibrate two things, they may actually be unrelated, but if we can calibrate them, we basically create the relationship. You know, the relationship is in the eye of the beholder. And it makes sense because that's kind of like saying like the sun going down means it's nighttime. Well, like the sun ain't never say that. The sun never said, yo, when I dip, it's nighttime. Or when I dip, that means it's 8 o'clock. Basically, from my understanding, all humans have done is just observe a phenomenon, observe it long enough to be able to like time it or predict it or understand it to some extent, and then go and observe something else, understand it, and then just figure out in what way do these two things relate to one another or interact with one another. I think by that method, you can make anything, any two things related. Kind of like in algebra, you know, there's a difference between expressions and equations. An expression doesn't have an equal sign. So that's just like you making a statement, right? You just saying the sun. That's an expression. I'm telling you, I'm expressing, right? An equation is when you put two expressions together and say these two are the same thing, which would be the sun is down, therefore it's nighttime. Or if I say it's nighttime, then the sun is down. So you create this syllogism or this equation, basically like 1A implies B and B implies A. You get what I'm saying? So there's a relationship there. But that's in the eye of the beholder, you know? That's in the eye of me, the observer. Now, whether or not that relationship exists out in the world apart from observation, I can't say, because what is a night? Night is a word. Words are social constructs, and these are things that souls, going back to, you know, where we started, these are things that souls made up. Souls created the concept of time and space and things like that so that we could understand the world around us, so that we could understand ourselves and how to survive and how to, you know, do this thing called life, you know, and to remember who we are. Time didn't, in a sense you could argue, or one could argue, that time exists apart from humans naming it. Like the passage of time as a phenomenon exists, and in which case, I guess it would depend what are you referring to when you say time, because time is kind of like red, you know, like it's a primary color. Red is a primary color. You build other colors up off of red, but it's changed actually, because nowadays they say you can make red with if you use the CYMK, you can make red from magenta and what is that, yellow. So you can make red, but prior to that it was like you can't make the primary colors red, blue, yellow. You can't make them. Like you can't mix two colors and make red. Now, you know, this goes to show you how information changes. You know, reality is a contrived modus vivendi. You know, like we know we know what we know up until that point, until we know more, and then it's kind of like, you know, you just gotta update. Like maybe what we thought we knew wasn't true. And I think this is a sidebar. I think sometimes people are aware of that and they're scared of losing face, or they want to save face, so they may make efforts to not say anything at all or not contribute because, it can be disproven years later, or it may come out that it wasn't 100% true. And I don't think the goal is to find some unchanging 100% every situation type of truth. I think the goal is to just find the next step on this staircase, and then once we get there, we'll be in a better position to see further than we could see before, and we might realize, yeah, that wasn't true, but we had to believe that. We had to believe the lie to get to the truth, in which case you still contributed. You still added something valuable, to life. And so, that was a quick sidebar. I do want to encourage other people to produce in general, just to produce. We do a lot of consumption, but you might have more to contribute than you know. And so, let's use another example, right? And this will probably be my last one. The belief, let's say the belief that God exists, right? Let's say you got three groups. One believes God exists. One believes that God does not exist. And then one is agnostic. They don't know. They're like, their answer is, I don't know if God does or does not exist. And then we just survey these people, these groups, to see who's happy. Like, on average, which group reports happiness, like, more than others? Which group is the happiest? I mean, to me, this is very simple. It's not rocket science. I mean, it's nothing difficult about it, which I feel very blessed that these ideas have come to me. And maybe they've come to other people as well, but I'm just blessed that I can see it so plainly, and it's very clear to me, and it just seems so simple. I mean, what you think? Because part of my inspiration was from observing. I grew up in North New Jersey, and I love my hometown. I rep my hometown. I'm a proud Norker, I guess. Growing up there, though, there was a lot of death. A lot of people my age kind of fell into that stereotype. You're gonna be dead or in jail. It's a lot of people. I don't know exact numbers, but I know that in that space, you can see white supremacy at work. And this is not to shade any white person. I'm saying, like, white supremacy as a system at work. Us believing the bullish, us believing the hype, watching them BET movies and going outside and acting it out and being in, food deserts, like all the things, education system, like all the lies that was told to us that had us performing certain things, which gets into the cynical part that relates to this whole notion of psychological advantageousness, because we were fed certain beliefs. There was that, I forgot who said it, I forgot where I heard it, but it was about, controlling a slave. Like, if you control a man's mind, you don't got to worry about his body. You don't got to worry about his actions. Like, he could be the strongest man, but if his mind is weak, you can control him. Like, he could be physically brute strength, but if you got his thoughts, if you can control what he thinks about, how he thinks about it, his impression of it, attitudes, beliefs, schemas, tendencies, self-image, knowledge of self, um, just his paradigm. That's all shaped, by your mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure. And your mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure is just the world that exists in your mind, your internal world. When thinking, that voice exists somewhere in that space. The same place on Get Out where she, stirred the tea and he went to that really dark place. In the movie, they didn't show you how that could be a gift to be able to access that space if you can do it willfully on your own. Like, he was put there as a punishment. But if you can access that space willfully on your own, that is a place of, creation and power. You can do a lot there. And so, I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit, but I would have to rewind it to remember where I was at, but I'm not going to do that. But I would say, okay, I remember the cynical part, where based on how much time, money, and energy and resources is invested in controlling the minds of, black people in America, and I guess populations in general, like governments control their population's beliefs and ideas and thoughts and things like that. I think it's known that there's a connection between what people believe and at a minimum, what they'll do. Like, beliefs impact actions. Now, if beliefs impact actions, your belief that cow milk gives you calcium and that's the only source of calcium and it's healthy for you, it's going to affect your actions, your health decisions, right? Which is going to affect your health, which is going to affect what minerals your body has or lacks. It's going to affect your nutrition, right? Your nutrition is going to affect the physical capabilities of your body. If your body is lacking certain nutrients, how can it produce all of the various liquids? Because the human body runs off various different types of liquids, acids and blood and the chemicals, the biochemistry is affected by nutrition, which is affected by beliefs about nutrition and education about nutrition, what you think is healthy and what's not. Or, oh, that don't matter, I'll drink some cow milk first thing in the morning. You don't know how much mucus that's putting in your body, or you don't know if that milk is even really from a cow, or how much steroids they put into the cow that goes into the milk that you didn't ingest that may affect. And so when we get into health psychology and health neuropsychology, I guess that's the missing part that I didn't talk about, like the neurophysiological impact of beliefs, So when we give these quality of life measures, right, what we're considering is not only do the people that believe in God, are they happier than the people that don't? We're also considering, is the neurological functioning of people that believe in God different from the people that don't? Which kind of leads into like a part 2 spin-off that I've thought about for years. Like, to a certain extent, I wonder if people believe what they can. Because in order to have a belief, there's a foundation, and I was in a meeting with teachers one day, and I was talking to them, and I had to give them, their praise and acknowledgement and thank them, because when you work with someone, especially like if you're trying to help someone in terms of like improving their wellness, improving their quality of life, the task is much easier when they have a vocabulary, or when you can see that there's some level of them being articulate. You know, how can you do talk therapy without talking? And that's just one specific intervention. But there isn't. What I'm saying is that the work that teachers do to basically program students' minds to be able to handle abstract concepts, to reason, to think critically, to think concretely, to manipulate facts and figures in their mind, or like, you know, because there is like some psychological assessment in which you ask people to rotate an image mentally. There's no image in front of them, but they have to do it in their minds. There's an overlap between the skills that teachers teach in the classroom and then your neuropsychological and neurophysiological functioning, which is why certain students that have neurodevelopmental disorders like autism and ADHD and, you know, other neurodevelopmental disorders get accommodations in classrooms and 504 plans and IEPs, because they need accommodations because their neurophysiological functioning may be significantly different from, I guess, the majority of people. You know, it may be noticeably different. Whereas though, you know, maybe it's certain things that they're not capable of mentally, in a similar way that if you go into the gym right now, can you pick up a 100-pound dumbbell? Yeah, maybe some people can, some people can't. Like literally, they can try, they can use all they might, they can't. And it's not saying they can't forever. Picking up a 100-pound dumbbell, well, you might have to start with 10. And that's, to me, that kind of explains or rationalizes, I guess justifies the progression of education from starting in elementary, which is, you know, elementary in anything is kind of like the beginning, like the beginner stages. I'm a noob in that sense. Like if you're in elementary, you kind of like a noob. You transition or you progress through school, and I'm not advocating for or against school. I'm just saying like humans develop and souls develop. Again, going back to the Plinko board, that whole process of going through these different levels of school, teachers are also pegs on that Plinko board, and they're going to push the students a certain way. Now, if your teacher don't challenge you, it may affect, because after each peg, there's another one, right? So if your 4th grade teacher was not challenging enough for you, 5th grade is going to be that much harder because there was no preparation. Whereas if your 4th grade teacher was difficult, you might get to 5th grade like, oh, this light. We was pushed so far. We was ahead of 4th grade. We already started consuming 5th grade content in 4th grade, which makes it, you know, now to the outside world, you appear, or you may actually even be gifted, because to a certain extent you're ahead of your peers. I guess where you're, you know, the average kid your age is expected to be at. But I say that just to, you know, make very clear that in common practice, in everyday practice, the relationship between the mental and emotional intrapsychic infrastructure and quality of life is evident. And the relation between a person's neurophysiological functioning and their ability to grasp concepts is evident, or their ability to do certain mental functions. You know, thinking abstractly, and I'll say this here because I guess this is just me just sharing thoughts. Like my whole concept of abstract art changed when I heard it phrased as abstraction rather than just abstract. When you say abstract, to me it sounds like regular, you know, like, oh, that's abstract. It almost sounds like, in some cases, it sounds like elementary, in a sense. Like, if you want to teach an art class, and you know students may or may not necessarily, say you teaching a kindergarten art class, like you may not teach them realism. That requires a certain meticulousness, so like, you know, you gotta like There's a lot of spatial reasoning, there's a lot of reconciling, there's a lot of self-checks, self-critiques about whether or not the image that you're producing matches the image that you're referring to. There's a lot of back and forth, like hermeneutics, in that type of work, which requires endurance. It requires, discipline. It requires drive. Fatigue sets in, and then you just start to feel like, man, we'll just, sometimes people have those type of reactions. So I guess I initially saw abstract to mean like, oh, I just did anything. I just shoot, like I just took this paint, just took this palette and just smeared it across. Now, aesthetically, that is abstract. But I was inspired recently when I heard it phrased as abstraction, which sounds like a process, which sounds like abstraction is both elementary and it's at the same time like postdoctoral in a sense, because to produce an abstraction means to reason inductively. So you're taking a specific situation or a specific concept, or you may be walking down the street and you see two people hug, right? That was your experience in real life. That's not abstract. That's real. That's hyper real. That's super hyper real. Like that's 20/20 vision in real life. To abstract that, to perform an abstraction, means to reduce what you saw into like simplest terms, into rules, into categories. Like seeing the forest from the trees, kind of like knowing the forest is made of trees, and capturing the essence of what you're looking at without the details. So to a certain extent, an abstraction, to me, when it was inspiring to think about it, was that it's a process. It takes thought. It takes skill to abstract from something. It takes skill for me to create a sculpture that looks elementary in the sense of the aesthetic, but the meaning is actually an abstraction. This is a generalization. This I inductively reasoned from something specific into this. And the process by which I do that, what I get out of my experiences, like what conclusions, what inducted conclusions I come up with, is going to be unique to the artist. So that gave me like a whole new appreciation for the genre, I guess, of abstract art. Now, I can't say that every artist is doing what I just described. I'm just saying, for me, I see it as, I was recently re-inspired, like that. I feel like that's cool. Because it's one thing to like look at a picture and make something of it. It's another thing to look at a picture, reduce it to its simplest terms, and then capture that using imagery. Like showing your family picture. Say you take a family picture, but you decide, yeah, I want to capture this family picture, but I only want to use circles. Like I'm restricting myself, because now we're talking about style and technique, right? So in a game of basketball, like basketball was born before like black people got in there and start adding the flavor. Like they ain't even dribble. You just pass, shoot. Wasn't a lot of flair, One thing Allen Iverson added to the game was that style, that swagger. And style to me is like, if you could live and then die and then come back and live again, you would have style the second time. Why? Because the first time you do it, maybe you did it like you just wanted to get it done. I just want to get this done. You focused on pragmatism. Style isn't necessarily pragmatic. Style might actually go against pragmatism. But on your second life, or if you felt like you had more time, or you had like a cushion, some type of parachute, there's some sense of comfort. There's some sense of luxury when it comes to showing style. It's like, I could do this a million ways. I'm about to really do this with my left hand, then my right hand, then I'm gonna paint it with my foot, then I'm gonna paint it with my eyes closed, then I'm gonna, you get all these different variations because you've mastered your craft. And so I hadn't really thought of abstract work as a form of mastery, but abstraction is, to me, by definition, the fact that you can abstract anything, you know? And it's, I forgot how that connects to what I was going to say about psychological advantageousness. But yeah, I've recently, my thoughts on that have recently been like, this is dope. Like, abstraction as a concept, as a process, is dope. Now, whether or not actual living abstract artists subscribe to that, neither here nor there for me. It doesn't really matter. I remember I mentioned abstract art because I was talking about how teachers equip students by educating them so that they can perform abstract reasoning. They can basically, when I say programming, I mean like a computer, like instilling within the child or the student the certain abilities. And depending on the abilities that are instilled in the student, that's going to affect what the student is capable of, their capacities, what can they handle. And what they can handle is probably going to affect how they feel, Especially if they're in a situation where they're surrounded more by the things that they can't handle than the things that they can. So yeah, shout out to the teachers that's equipping students with mental faculties. I did recently, so I do have access to a data set, and I did look at the a certain correlation. I wrote it down. I just gotta find it. Well, I'm not gonna look for it right now because I don't feel like it. But I did look at a study. I believe it was looking at middle-aged African Americans in the DMV area, and I was looking at correlations between a particular belief. I don't remember what belief it was. Man, this is, I feel like looking it up now. I'll let that be another video when I give you, specific details about what it was. But long story short, my preliminary findings is that there is potentially some mediational or moderational relationship spanning between beliefs, individual beliefs, such as the belief that God exists, and quality of life and neurophysiological functioning, or scores on a neuropsychological assessment. So when you take an assessment like a Stroop, let's say you take a Stroop, right? That's the joint where you got a list of words. All of the words are colors, and the text of the words are colors as well, but the colors don't match. So you might see the word red, but it's in blue ink. You might see the word black, but it's in yellow ink. And your task is to forego the urge to read the word red, black, and say the color of the word. So now you gotta, there's some inhibition there. There's some mental faculties, like your brain is working. And I wanna say it's timed, because you got all day to do it. Anybody can do it, But I want to say it's time to see how long does it take you to get through it. And usually they compare like people doing the regular just read it. Like how fast does it take you to read? It might take you 10, 15 seconds to read it. Like when red is red and blue is blue. But when red is blue and blue is red, like the ink versus the word are mismatched, it might take you 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute to like, oh yeah, man, and then you can also count errors, right? Like how many times you're gonna make a mistake and read black as red. But if black is in red ink, or red is in black ink, and your task is to read the ink color, you might make 3, 4, 5 errors. That's just what it is. And so what I'm looking at is, does an individual's performance on that type of test? No, let's get back to calibration. What's the relationship or correlation between an individual's performance on that type of test and their beliefs? Also, what's the relationship between performance on that type of test and quality of life? Right, so that's why I was saying there may be some mediation or moderation in it, because ultimately we're connecting A to C, right? A is quality of life. A is the belief, an individual belief, like a statement. I believe in God. C is quality of life, like a score on a quality of life assessment, where higher scores mean better quality of life, lower scores mean less quality of life, lower quality of life. And B would be the neuropsychological assessment scores, like on that Stroop test. So, quality of life affects, you know, beliefs, individual beliefs affect scores on the test. Scores on the test, why I keep saying affect? I'm getting it together, y'all. The individual beliefs are correlated with scores on the neuropsychological assessment. Scores on that assessment are correlated with quality of life scores. Also, there's a direct correlation between individual beliefs and quality of life scores, as well as, there you go. And so, that's the model I'm seeing, and I do have evidence of that. It is written down, but I am painting right now, so I cannot show that to you guys. But that is, that's what I've been studying. That's where I'm at currently. Like I said, I see it as a body of research. It's not just one study or one question, because there's so many beliefs. So like, I don't want to say it all here, but just there's so many beliefs, so many to choose from. So many ways to measure quality of life. So many ways to measure neurophysiological and neuropsychological functioning. So many ways to connect that Plinko board, how someone was pushed around by factors in their environment, kind of like epigenetics, but I guess that would be social psychology. How is this person's environment shaping this soul to express a personality and to shape how their organs develop, how their physical flesh develops or adapts to what's in front of them. I mean, this is exciting stuff to me. I think, think about this often.